Hello, everybody. Okay, so this week we're going to sort of take a detour to some editing topics that aren't applying to us this week or very much this semester, but are really important to you. If you want to make a career of this and you want to get serious about editing projects, particularly for other people. So, what we're going to get into today are issues associated with ingest or import. So bringing in media, different kinds of media, dealing with proxies and that kind of stuff. So I'm going to do a little mini lecture, talk about some general principles and guidelines, but then also point you to some specific tutorials that you don't need to do those tutorials to complete what we're doing in this class. But if you want a future in editing and you want to be prepared, you'll want to take a look at those tutorials or at least bookmark them for later. So when you get that job where you need to know how to do this stuff, you can go and refresh your memory. Okay, so let's talk about ingest, ingesting media, which is bringing media into Adobe Premiere. Importing is also what we can call this. And in Premiere, there's multiple ways to do everything. So you're probably most familiar, right, with you go over here, you can either go like File, Import, you can do right-click, Import. You also may even be familiar with, using the media browser, which allows you to then go dig up some media like here, and then you can import from here. Okay, and this media browser, it can be useful um, for if you're shooting AVC HD. Remember when you used to shoot on the Panasonics and they were coming in AVC HD, and the normal import method wouldn't show you all your clips, but the media browser would. So it's important that you're familiar with the different ways to bring things in. Now, Premiere is great, and it can handle many, many different formats of video and codecs and resolution and all of this different stuff. And you can customize it and tell it exactly what you want. That can get tricky, so that's why I always recommend once you bring in your media that before you start editing, you create a sequence with new sequence from clip. And then Adobe is going to look at your clip and create a sequence that matches. And what that means is all of this stuff. Okay? So sequence settings. You can customize this and set this yourself, then drop in the media. As you get more experienced, that's great. That's something you can do. But in the beginning, and to be honest, even myself, this is a foolproof way. If I know I'm working with all the same media, that I can just do this and I know my sequence is going to be all set. So you can look here and you can see, the pixel aspect ratio, the frame rate, the codec, all of this different stuff is located right here under sequence settings. Up to this point, and with all the cameras we have at school and probably that you have at home, you have been cutting footage that's maybe HD, maybe 2K, maybe 4K, although we haven't really been getting into that much, and if we have, it's kind of a lightweight 4K. And as a result, you have for the most part been able to just bring in footage and start cutting it
the news.
No problem. And Adobe handles it. This bar here is yellow, so it doesn't need rendering, and things are not clunky and slow. Now, what eventually will start happening here, especially if you get serious into editing, is you're going to start editing footage that is really high resolution and really large file size, because there's so much information packed into it that your computer won't be able to keep up with it in real time. Okay, some flavors of 4K you'll start running into this, but it's more likely to start happening if you are shooting and cutting raw, or if you're working on a project with a camera like the Red Epic, where the red camera is shooting raw, which just means it's shooting these big file sizes that keeps all the information. So we're talking like gigs and gigs and gigs and terabytes of data, and it's great for shooting. It gets you all this information, but it's not good for editing. So what do we do? How do we handle this? Well, this isn't a new problem. This is been an issue for computers and editing for actually even before computers, when we used to cut things on videotape. And what we used to call it is offline and online editing. And you can still call it that. And basically what we're talking about is we need to make low resolution, smaller file size copies of these big jumbo clips. And then but we need to make sure the names and the time code match between these different files. And then in the computer here, we're going to edit all the low res, the small copies. And then once we have our picture locked and we're all done editing, then we're going to swap it all out for the big, heavy-duty, large files for export. So this is offline, online editing. Offline is when you're working with the small copies. Online is when you're finishing up with everything full resolution, big and beautiful. So these copies are called proxies, okay? And this has become more and more easy, and Adobe has really cool tools that basically allow you to select all of these, let's say you're shooting raw on a DSLR. You can select all the raw files that you want to import, and you can tell Adobe, hey, import those, but while you're importing them, make proxies that are these low resolution copies. I'm going to edit the proxies, and then Adobe makes it so easy. There's really just a button to click, and when you're done, you can swap, and it will swap out the full res for the low res. So juggling proxies and doing this offline online thing really isn't that complicated. Adobe makes it very easy. The challenge of it, and the thing you need to be careful about, is you need to be organized. And that's why, in the past weeks where we were talking about bins and labels and all of this stuff, you need to be really on top of that, because you're juggling double of everything, right? And you need to make sure names match. You need to make sure you know where all of these things are located. But if you're an organized editor, this proxy stuff has really become so much easier than it used to be. And up on Moodle, I put a link to a really nice tutorial that dives more deeply into how to use the proxies in Adobe. So if you're interested now in learning more about it, go check out that tutorial. You will definitely need to know how to do this if you get into more serious editing. You can't avoid it. Get ahead of the game and check out that tutorial. Now, something as you become more advanced as an editor, but even let's say you're going to be a DP or a director or even in audio, what becomes more and more important is your ability to understand and manage time code. Okay, time code is sort of the spine underneath all the video and audio that we use that keeps everything linked up and how we organize things. So the farther you get in your career, the more serious you're going to have to get about time code. And what I mean by that is, when professional DPs and camera operators and audio recorders start a new SD card, right? They start new recordings. They go into the menus and they set their time code differently for every card. So for example, let's say I'm shooting, I'm going to shoot 3 cards today on my DSLR. I'm going to go in and I'm going to manually set the time code for the first card to be hour 1, so 01 0000000. So my first clip will always have this hour 1 at the very beginning. And I know anything that comes off this clip, off this card, was from like day 1, and we'll have this hour 1, which indicates it's from the first card. Now the next card I'm going to do 02, 03. And if I'm an audio recorder, I'm going to do similar things, to keep everything straight. And then this can get further complicated if you're using um, an electronic slate, like I think I have there, something like this, right? If you're using a slate like this, you can sync your camera and audio recording time code to the slate so they all match up. Now, initially, this is a big headache and something you'll have to learn. Um, but if you take the time and you learn how to set your time code in your camera, in your zoom, and on your slate, it's going to save you so much time in the long run, because when you get here to edit, all of those time code numbers are going to line up. So if things get disorganized, you can go and line up the time code from the audio, the slate, and the picture, and things will link up. So don't ignore time code. I know when we're shooting our own things and you're going to be syncing it yourself, or you're shooting always sync audio anyway because you're shooting on like the C100. Um, don't ignore time code. It's something that as you get into the professional realm, it's going to become more and more important. So when you get a chance, dive into that manual about your camera and refresh your memory on what's going on there. Okay, so sometimes we have to use proxies to handle seriously large footage. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we can cut, like 4K footage that isn't raw in Adobe Premiere, and just have a couple of strategies to help make us make this manageable. So let me take this clip. So here's a little clip. This is some 4K footage. And here, let me blow this up so we can take a look here at some different things. So here I've got some footage from a documentary I was cutting. It's 24 frames per second. Here's our time code. And then here is our video information. So 3840 by 2160, that is technically a flavor of 4K. Okay, so that's some 4K footage. Now, my iMac can handle it, is what I discovered. Let me drop it over here. Okay, so I'm going to create a new sequence for this clip. There we go. So there's our 4K footage with it's got crazy amounts of audio tracks that I'm going to get rid of all but the two I have anything on. But what I noticed was 4K was my computer could handle it pretty well up until if I started layering things, or I applied an effect or a title above. And what would happen then was it would just start chugging a little. So what can you do without using proxies just to make it manageable so you can work with some footage that's maybe a little hard for your computer to use? Well, the first easiest thing you can do is go right over here to playback resolution. Right now I'm set to full playback resolution. So when I hit play, I'm seeing all 4,000 plus pixels here. Now I'm working on a little tiny screen here. I can't appreciate this 4K. I'm not doing color correction. It's really overkill for me. So what you can do is you can drop that down to quarter or to half, and you probably won't even notice a difference when you hit play, but the computer has less work to do, half the work to do, and it may resolve your issue. Sometimes I've gone all the way down to a quarter and things start looking a little pixelated, but if I'm doing basic editing, not color correction or some graphics work, it doesn't really matter. Now, another thing you can do if you're still running into issues is go into your preferences and go to memory. And right here under memory, you can change allocation around here of RAM reserved for other applications and RAM reserved for Adobe. And when I was cutting this documentary, I had this cranked way down. So basically, Adobe was using my entire computer to do what it needed to do. Anything else wasn't getting much RAM and wouldn't really work, but that's okay. I wasn't doing anything else. So that's another thing you can tweak to help you out. Now, another issue and what we ran into with this documentary was, you can shoot 4K or 6K, 8K, But who's going to watch it in 4K, right? How many people have 4K TVs? How many people are streaming 4K? Um, how many movie theaters can even project 4K? 2K tends to be, at least for theater projection at the moment, much more what you're going to run into. And certainly when you get into 6K, 8K, like nobody can see that. So it's great to shoot in it. It's great to color correct in it, maybe, but your finished product doesn't need to be that high res. So in that case, what you might consider doing is using your 4K footage, but creating a 2K sequence. Okay? And what that means is I'm going to create a sequence, and when I bring in this 4K footage, it's all going to appear zoomed in because it's too big for the frame, and then I can scale it down. Okay? Now, to create a 2K sequence, what you need to do is make sure your sequence settings match. Everything matches except for the resolution. Okay? So right here, I see I'm 3840 by 2160 and I'm 16 by 9. So I need to create a 2K sequence with everything the same and a 16 by 9 aspect ratio, but with lower resolution here. Now I found a handy guide online that this person put out that's the resolution aspect ratio cheat sheet. So basically what you can do is you can take a look here. So here's 4K and there's mine. Or no, that's not mine. Here's the 4K I'm working with. So here's the 4K I'm working with. 4K HD Quad HD. 16 by 9 is the 3840 by 2160. And now I need to go to 2K 16 by 9. So I need to go to 2048 by 1152. Okay, and this cheat sheet makes that easy. So 2048 by 1152. I'm going to go in here. And actually, let's see if it'll let me do this. I'm going to delete that clip. Go to sequence settings. I already forgot the number. 2048 by 11, 2048 by 2048 by 1152. Boom. Now I'm going to bring that clip back over. It's going to say, hey, this clip no longer matches the sequence settings because I changed them to 2K. Do you want me to change them to match the clip? No, keep existing settings. That's the whole reason I did this. Keep. And I'm going to get rid of this stuff again. And now what we'll see is, hey, it looks fine. But watch this. If I double click and I go to effects control, you can see I'm only at basically half scale. Okay? So if I scale up to 100%, that's my 4K footage in a 2K sequence. Okay? Obviously, I don't want to do that. So I'm going to undo and go back to 53.3. It was nice of Adobe to recognize that the footage was too big. Sometimes it'll do that, sometimes it won't, and I would have to manually go through and scale that down. And now I'm cutting in a 2K sequence. All my 4K footage is going to look great in here, scaled down to 50%. And then if I want to reframe, I can reframe up to 100%, which is pretty awesome and pretty intense, right? So I could reframe a shot that significantly and lose no resolution, all right? So that's the advantage that you can get from shooting 4K and cutting 2K, or shooting, higher resolutions and cutting them in a smaller sequence. Now, if Adobe doesn't make this change, right, a handy shortcut you can do, and this goes either for scaling down or scaling up, is you can right click on a clip, scale to frame size, and set to frame size. I don't know why, but set to frame size is the one I use and is the one that to me makes the most sense. Basically, they do the same thing. The difference is when I say scale to frame size, it scales it to the right size, but look over here, my scale remains at 100. So unless I remember down the road that I did that, this isn't going to tell me that I've already scaled up. Whereas if you do set to frame size, same results, but it changes it here so that I know this change was made and I can make adjustments. I prefer that. So if you're going to do this, I recommend, and remember, this is whether you're going larger or smaller, right click, set to frame size. Now this becomes a big issue if you're dealing with multiple resolutions within one project. Now, ideally, this doesn't happen. If you're shooting all your own stuff, like if you're shooting a narrative or even a documentary or commercial, you want to make sure you're shooting all of it 2K or HD or 4K and everything matches. But occasionally you run into a situation like, let's say you're editing a documentary that's using archival footage from, people's home video cameras or something. So you have some like low res stuff mixed with your, for example, like this high res interview footage, right? What do you do if you have SD, HD, 4K all in one project? How do you handle it? Well, the bad news is really what you should do is whatever is your lowest resolution. Let's blow this up and take a look, imagining that this was like our project. So where's our resolution here? Here we go. I've got 2K, I've got 4K, I've got SD, and I've got HD. So if we needed to use all of these, what the bad news is that would mean Boss Lou and his SD video is really what our sequence should be set to. And the reason is simple. There is a limit to how large, so let's put this to 100%, right? If I have a 2K sequence and I want to include SD footage, this is how small that footage actually is. And in order to make it match, I have to blow it up 400%. And at 400%, even if I set this to full resolution,
And look at her, she's boiling
and I make this full,
your blood.
it's
And
unacceptably pixely and
let's try
crummy
this.
looking. Okay, so that isn't going to work. The rule I always used to stand by is you usually can get away with 110%. If you can go 110% scaling up, you probably aren't going to notice the pixels. But beyond 110, people are going to spot it, and your quality is going to look bad. So what that means is I need to create a new sequence from this footage, and all my other footage needs to be scaled down to match this. Okay, so when I bring in my 2K stuff, boop, I need it to be scaled down to match this, which happens to be 22%. This is why you want to avoid this happening, okay? But sometimes it happens, and you've got to go with your lowest resolution. Now, let's say you're making like a 30-minute documentary. 90% or 95% is all going to be 2K. There's 5% that you need to use this SD footage. All right, I think we need to find a way to make this sequence 2K and work around this low res footage. Now, one of the old tricks, right, is you do something like you copy it on top of itself, something like this, and then the one on the bottom you like scale up. Now this is a crazy scenario because we have to blow it up 400%. But right, you've seen this on TV a million times, right? You do something like this, and then on the bottom one, you apply some kind of blur, right? Like this kind of a deal. Boop, and let's blur that out. There it is. Right, so it's
and action.
right. You've seen this on TV. It doesn't look good. It is only something you would do if absolutely necessary. Another strategy is they will sometimes write in After Effects or something, they'll build like a TV frame and they'll place this SD footage inside some sort of existing frame to give it context of why it looks so crummy and why it's so small. Another option, and I personally have never really done this, but because it's basically what we're talking about is like restoration, like film restoration. And what it is, it's called upscaling. Okay? So it's digitally blowing up footage and then having the computer using artificial intelligence figure out what pixels are missing and filling that in to try to improve the quality of the upscale. And After Effects has an effect called detail preserving upscale. So what you could do, now I think this 400% is beyond what it would be able to do, but right, you right click, replace with After Effects composition. Then when you're in After Effects, you go get this detail preserving upscale effect, you apply it, and then you come back to Premiere. And in theory, this would allow you to go beyond 110%. I don't know if it'll let you do 200%, maybe 150, and the results are meant to be better. Now, I put a tutorial up on Moodle if you want to dive into this and try it out. Maybe you've already run into a situation there where this would have helped you out. Try to avoid this situation. Try to have all your resolutions match.